If I could get everybody's attention, please. We're going to start the program in about 2 minutes, so we're going to ask people to take their seats in preparation to go live across the United States. And please turn off your cell phones. minute. Good morning. My name is Leif Grenna. I am the president of the Minneapolis Regional Retirees Council, and I have a question. How many of you have heard from your children, your grandchildren, nieces, or nephews that Social Security will not be there for them? How many of us have heard this? Pretty much all of us. Think about it. A propaganda machine has created the belief that something that they pay for will not be there for them. That's a remarkable political achievement, to get so many people to believe that something that they work for and pay for will not be there. Somebody's going to take their money. Seems like somebody is either lying or perpetrating a fraud. Good morning, brothers and sisters, friends and neighbors, and welcome to the Forum on the Future of Social Security. Social Security, count on it. We are here today to dispel these falsehoods, myths, and lies surrounding Social Security, and hopefully set a path toward preserving, promoting, and expanding it in the future. On behalf of the Minneapolis Regional Retirees Council of the Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation and our co-sponsors, the University of Minnesota Labor Education Service, we welcome you. Our council is composed of some 18 labor union retiree organizations and fellow travelers. We are largely a volunteer organization, but we enjoy generous support from the Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation, for which we are immensely grateful to Chelsea Glaubitz, its president, and to Graham Allen, its staff. Our purpose as a council is to build power, to promote the interests of retirees and senior citizens, and provide a place for friendships to be made and grow. The University of Minnesota Labor Education Service has a faculty and staff dedicated to providing educational and training programs for union members and leaders throughout the state. John C., on their staff, back there with the headphones on, has given us countless hours of his time, energy, and expertise, and for that we are especially grateful. We are also very grateful to our brothers and sisters of Teamsters Local 120 and its president, Tom Erickson, for the use of this hall this morning. We must acknowledge also the organization Save Our Pensions for its work to help make today happen with their generous contribution of time and money. You'll see them. They're all wearing their T-shirts. Theirs is a struggle to preserve the pensions they have worked so hard for, and for them, Social Security becomes ever more important. We wish to also acknowledge Karen Friedman of the Pension Rights Center for connecting us with our featured speaker, Nancy Altman. And there are many other organizations that have helped make today possible. We hope you'll take a minute to look at the list. It's also in your program. While our council is mostly a small volunteer organization, we are blessed that in the spirit of working people building power together, so many of our brothers and sisters in labor have pitched in to make today happen. Our program today will feature videos of stories about what Social Security has meant to Americans that will be shown on the screen at various times. Following our featured speaker, who will give us an overview of issues and challenges and proposals for Social Security in the future, we've asked our panel to weigh in with their knowledge about various aspects of the program. We will follow that by questions and answers from the audience. Cards for you to submit questions are being distributed. Am I right? Okay. Please, if you wish to write a question, write it down, raise your hand, it will be collected. We will take related questions and only ask one on any particular subject in the interest of time. And finally, our goals for today are for you to learn the truth about the state and future of Social Security, but second, to inspire you to leave here feeling agitated and ready to act. Social Security is a vital program for all Americans. It is a testament to the kind of people we can be and the kind of future we can create. A nation that cares about all its people. Ours is a small organization, but an ambitious one. Our hope is that today we can play a role in elevating Social Security and its future to be a frontline issue in the 2020 election season. Towards this, as I said, we are streaming this event live nationally. It will be available after today on YouTube and Facebook. Those of you of the generation that understand either or both of them. Our goal today is nothing less than to build power to preserve and expand the most successful program for economic justice the United States has ever seen. But what will be most important is not what you experience here today, but what you and others will do in the coming weeks and months to preserve and expand this vital program. And now, toward our goal to educate, inspire, and agitate, we will open our program with a story about what Social Security has meant to one of our members and a video to stir you up.
When I was approximately 14 or 15 years old, I was probably a freshman or a sophomore in high school. I was a station manager. I'd worked my way up from a route carrier, a paper boy. And all my brothers, you had to be 10 years old before you could have a paper route. We were all employed by the Star and Tribune Company at the same time. We were out, and one Sunday morning, I passed out the papers to, 15, 20 paper boys, 25 paper boys, and my brothers included, and they did the routes, and I cleaned up the station, and we met, and we had breakfast at Freddie Groby's Cafe on West Broadway. We came home, we walked home probably about 3.5 blocks, and we lived on 21st and Penn at the time in North Minneapolis. And we saw an ambulance out in front of the house, and we came home, and my sister was sent out of the house and told us to stay out, that my father was ill. Well, as it turns out, my father had died. My mother raised us, and we were all in private high school at the same time. Probably got a reduction because there was more than one of us there. But to do that on the small pension that she got from the IBEW, she got help from Social Security, and she would have never made it without the money that came from Social Security. With any less income from either Social Security or the retirement, that wouldn't have been possible for any one of us, and probably all of us, that any of the income. She was so frugal. I can remember now when we look back, we used to kid her about her aprons and her dresses and stuff were so thin you could see through them. That she didn't care about herself. All she cared about was her kids. She always had good meals on the table. And without that little extra income, I shouldn't say little extra income, it was significant to do what she did. So Social Security, we can get rid of it, but we'll feel it. I think it's great to get rid of it for the really wealthy in this country, but for us working stiffs, it's something we've paid into our entire life, and it's something we depend on, and we don't realize that until we retire, how important it is. And I think you ask anybody that's drawing a pension in Social Security, they'll tell you the same thing. I don't think anybody will tell you, oh, I don't want my Social Security check.
Imagine if you had a business with no debt, and it could pay every penny of its bills for the next quarter century. Well, you do. It's called Social Security. But I bet you've heard, Social Security is just a bunch of worthless IOUs. False. Young workers will never see a penny in benefits. Social Security is a liberal plot to destroy America. Sorry. False again. These are all lies we've been led to believe. The truth is, Social Security has been paying its own way since day one. We all pay in when we're working, so it's there for us and our families when we need it. Hey, we earned it, and no one should ever try to take it away. So, who wants us to think Social Security is failing? Meet Billy Bankster, Wall Street banker and pension fund raider. He's worth billions, but thinks you're the one with too much money. So, he wants to cut your Social Security. Yeah, and he runs with the same crowd that helped Bush try to privatize Social Security back in 2005. If these guys had privatized Social Security, we'd all be rich now. Actually, posed. So now they're trying a new tack. They're blaming the deficit on Social Security. But it's a lie. Social Security doesn't borrow any money, and by law, can't add a single penny to the deficit. These guys ran up the deficit. Remember? Tax cuts for the super wealthy, 2 wars on Uncle Sam's credit card, bailouts for bankers. Yeah, and now they want to take your Social Security away to pay for their mistakes. And what are they after? Helping your grandchildren? Your money. What they want is to get their hands on the Social Security surplus. Social Security isn't at risk, except from the people trying to destroy it. Look, Congress can fix Social Security without cutting the benefits you've earned, with a few simple adjustments that require Wall Street fat cats to pay their share. More than fair, given they're the ones who crashed the economy. Social Security is America's family protection plan, and it works. It works for America. It works for everyone. Tell us how Social Security works for you. In fact, tell the whole country. Strengthen Social Security. Don't cut it.
And now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Nancy Altman. Nancy is the president of Social Security Works, an organization I understand you started. She has served in many capacities related to Social Security in the federal government and is the author of several books on the subject, one of which we are pleased to have on sale in the lobby, $15. And if you would like, after we adjourn, Nancy said she would be glad to sign them. We highly recommend you read them. I will be candid. I thought I was going to be like, okay, this is going to put me to sleep. But she's a very good writer and tells a wonderful story. We wish to extend a warm welcome to Nancy, and we are grateful that you are here with us today.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you all of you for being here. There has literally been a billionaire-funded, decades-long campaign against Social Security, and it's still going on. It hasn't succeeded in cutting benefits, but it has undermined confidence that the program will be there in the future, as Leif was talking about and as all of you attested to. It also convinced too many policymakers, media, and the general public that, again, it's not going to be there. There are a number of tactics that it's been using. One is just language. How many have heard Social Security called an entitlement? Of course, it's not. It's an earned benefit. It's not a safety net, which also, it sounds like a government handout. This is no government handout. We pay for this with every paycheck. Another is a divide and conquer strategy. It's young versus old, intergenerational warfare. This program's not going to be there. You know, all of that, these greedy geezers are stealing your money. Actually, Social Security is an example of intergenerational solidarity. It's the nation's largest children's program. It's important for the entire family. Another divide and conquer is, oh, those people with disabilities, they're just, they're just they're conning us. It's disabled against seniors. No, we workers earn this money. This is insurance, it's wage insurance in the event that wages are lost as a result of old age, disability, or death. It is there for all of us. It unites us. It is all of us contributing, sharing our risks and responsibilities. But perhaps the worst tactic is the idea that all of a sudden, Social Security is no longer affordable, that somehow 1935, during the Great Depression, it was affordable. 1956, when they added disability insurance, it was affordable. 1965, when Medicare was added, it was affordable. Somehow, now when we're at the wealthiest moment in our history, somehow, oh gosh, guess we can't afford it anymore. So let me tell you the truth. If you look at this first slide, this is one thing to understand about Social Security is that it's extremely closely monitored, it's extremely closely maintained, so that every year the Social Security actuaries, about 40 actuaries, because it's insurance, employed by the Social Security Administration, put out a report to Congress as required by law every April, and they project out not 10 years or 20 years, which normal pension plans generally do, 25 years, which Germany does with its pension plan, not 45 years, which OECD requires for its European members. It projects out 75 years, 3/4 of a century. The program's only 84 years old, but it projects out 75 years to give the American people confidence that their money our money is being really closely watched and carefully monitored. And if there are any shortfalls, Congress has plenty of time to act. So this is the latest trustees report, the one that came out in 2019. It shows Social Security's costs over the next 75 years as a percentage of GDP. And as you'll see, it's a horizontal line. This is not something that's going, up. If you look at our healthcare costs, they are going up. If you project out 75 years, they say we're going to be spending 99% of GDP because we have the most expensive, wasteful system. I know I'm not supposed to be talking about other issues, but Medicare for all is why I think we need that. But in any event, Social Security is not that. It is a straight line. So there's no question we can afford it. And if you look at how much other countries spend for their counterpart programs, other countries spend often twice as much today as we will be spending 75 years from now. There is no question we can afford Social Security. It's a matter of values. It's not a matter of affordability. But the American people are united in the valuing Social Security, which is why the tactic is to pretend that what's true is false and what false is true, that somehow we can't afford it. In fact, Social Security is the most efficient, secure, universal source of retirement income that we have in this country. We can have, or is imaginable to have. Less than a penny of every dollar that is spent on administration. More than 99 cents is paid in benefits. You do not see that kind of low administrative expense in private pensions. You certainly don't see them in 401k plans, which have a lot of hidden fees. So it's extremely efficient. It's extremely secure. Its sponsor is the federal government. Unlike private employers that sponsor plans, the federal government's not going out of business. It's not worried about making a profit. So it is extremely secure. Its one shortcoming is that its benefits are too low. For a long time, this billionaire-funded campaign against Social Security convinced Democrats as well as Republicans that, oh my gosh, we're going to have to cut benefits and the American people will throw us out of office. We got to go behind closed doors and do it in some undemocratic way. Fortunately, the Democrats have returned to their roots and woken up, and they now are champions of Social Security. This is the language, and I know it's a little bit hard to read, but from the 2016 Democratic platform. And the important point is bold, and it's only actually part of it. It's worth going online and looking at the whole plank and reading it. But it's Democrats will expand Social Security so that every American can retire with dignity and respect. Even though at this point the Republicans are still talking about, oh, we need we want to save Social Security. We want a bipartisan solution, which is Washington Code for benefit cuts. I consider expanding Social Security totally bipartisan. And by that, I mean, if you look at polling, Tea Partiers agree with union members about Social Security across the whole ideological spectrum. The American people understand Social Security and value it, and don't just by a small amount or a close amount. As polarized as we are over many issues, Social Security is one where we are united. Everyone agrees about Social Security. Here's a poll from just last March. 70% of Americans support expanding Social Security. 74% say Social Security benefits should never be reduced. And this is, as I say, this is a very heavily polled area. Every candidate polls on Social Security. We poll on Social Security. AARP polls, the Heritage Foundation. Again, everybody polls on this issue. And no matter how you phrase the questions, the polling comes out the same. And it's an important issue people understand for the election. 2/3 of voters have said, this was a poll from just before the 2018, the March before the 2018 midterms. 2/3 of workers are more likely to back candidates who support expanding Social Security. So this is an issue that is the right policy and the right politics. And fortunately, the members of Congress are not just saying they support it, they're acting on it. There's the chairman of the Social Security Subcommittee of the House Ways and Means Committee. He was ranking, and after the 2018 election with House going Democratic, he now chairs it. He has been introducing a bill for actually since 2013 called the Social Security 2100 Act. The reason it's called the 2100 Act is because it expands benefits and ensures that all benefits already scheduled and those that he's proposing can be paid through the year 2100 and beyond. What this bill does is it expands benefits across the board. It also, well, I'll tell you, there are people in Washington who think it is. Remember a few years ago when there was a 0 increase? They thought that was too big. But the Representative Larson, who has 209 co-sponsors, virtually 90% of House Democrats, is posing what's called the Consumer Price Index for the elderly. People, as you know, older people, people with disabilities, tend to have higher healthcare costs, tend not to buy the latest smartphone and technology. And it's healthcare costs that, of course, have been rising very rapidly, drug prices and healthcare costs. And, smartphones, you get one every year that's less expensive, get more features for less and all of that. So the current cost of living increase is the CPIW. It doesn't even look at retirees, it's only workers. That was what was in effect in 1972 when Congress enacted automatic adjustments. But now it's time to update it. And that's another piece of this proposal. He pays for it by gradually scrapping the cap, which, as you know, goes up every year. It's currently $132,900, and it will move up. And he does it very, very gradually over about 30 years. That will be completely gone. He also asks current workers to pay just a little bit more. It comes out to, in 2020, if this were enacted, current workers would pay an additional nickel on $100 earned. But of course, Republicans are saying, oh my God, you can't do that. But he has, because he chairs the subcommittee, and he has just been tremendous on this issue. We've had 5 hearings, and he is pushing very hard for the Ways and Means Committee to have a vote and to have the full House of Representatives have a vote. Force everyone, including the Republicans, to go on record and not just be able to say, we want to save Social Security, we love Social Security, but vote. Are you going to expand it or are you going to cut it? And there are some in the Democratic leadership who are cautious and afraid about their members voting on any kind of revenue increase. I do not think, this is partly language, we should ever call these payroll taxes. Workers, of course, don't have payrolls, but more fundamentally, these are premiums. These are FICA is Federal Insurance Contributions Act. So this is, you're raising the premium and you're getting more in return. It would give an across-the-board increase for all current and future beneficiaries. And I'm happy to say that 5 of your representatives are co-sponsors of this legislation. And among the action items, which I know you're going to get to at the end, but I would urge, to the extent that for your representative, to thank them for co-sponsoring the 2100 Act and to urge them to make sure there is a vote. I think that is extremely important. There's also, so that's what's happening legislatively. Obviously, if it passes the House, it'll go in Mitch McConnell's graveyard with all the other good legislation. But it will be a focal point where every candidate will have to answer, will have either voted if they're running in the House, if they're an incumbent, or will have to answer this question. It will really highlight the issue. So I think it's an important to, again, thank representatives. And if any of your representatives are not up there, then ask them why they're not. It's also it will be a presidential issue if the mainstream media pushes it. They've bought into this billionaire-funded conspiracy because they hobnob with these people and they have a lot of access. They're not very many of them, but they have enormous influence. And so, as you've probably seen, there's not been a single question about Social Security in the debates, even though it affects everyone. Elizabeth Warren, to her credit, in the last debate, mentioned it anyway. And as you'll see, the top tier candidates all support expansion. Senator Bernie Sanders and Warren were early in on expanding Social Security. He had one of the first expansion bills in. His also, similar to the Larson bill, is an across-the-board benefit increase. It's actually a larger increase, he does not increase the FICA rate. What he does is have those earning $250,000 or more pay not just on their wages but also on their investment income. And he also slowly closes the cap over about 20 years. His has 12 co-sponsors in the Senate, but they include presidential candidates, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. Joe Biden was a little bit of wavering, but he now is on board for expansion. He has a proposal out. His are targeted increases. He does not have across the board increases, but he does, and I don't know if there are any in the audience who are affected by this, he does eliminate WEP GPO, which I think is an important targeted increase. So he's a little vague about how he'd pay for it. He talks about the cap also. So he's got the least fleshed out one, but he is definitely on his website, is in favor of expanding. And Senator Warren, just before not this last debate, the one before it, came out with her Social Security plan. She would increase benefits $200 a month. And in addition, she proposes a caregiver credit. So when people have to take time out of the workforce for family caregiving, they don't also lose their retirement security. She increases widowed benefits and has a number of other increases. Hers, I would say, Larson's is the most moderate expand proposal, and hers is the most progressive proposal. But they are all a big shift from 10 years ago when everybody was saying we had to cut. So really, in conclusion, I think that this is a fight we can win. This is the right thing. We should, anytime anybody says Social Security is a problem, we should say, what are you talking about? It's a solution, and it is a solution. We've earned this. It works extremely well. It works better than any kind of private sector counterpart. And with all of us being engaged, being involved, knowing the facts, talking to our friends and neighbors, talking to our elected officials, it may not be this year or next year, but we are going to win on this issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy. Nancy just said something I wrote down. She said, this is a fight we can win. Do you believe that? Yeah. All right. We have with us a panel of distinguished experts, what we'll call them, on various aspects of Social Security. And we have asked each of them to take a few minutes to talk about their particular interest or area of expertise and to give some local context. You know, what does this program mean particular for Minnesotans? So I would like to introduce first, I'm going to try and get this right, Rajan. All right. Rajan Moon. Dr. Moon is the Executive Director of the Minnesota Leadership Council on Aging. He is also the Faculty Director for the Long-Term Care Administration at the University of Minnesota. And he has been, this is impressive, a McNair Scholar, a Hartford Fellow, a National Health and Aging Policy Fellow, and American Political Science Congressional Fellow. Dr. Moon, we welcome you and we thank you for taking time to be with us here today.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here. Thank you. I think most importantly, probably included in that list is I come from a union family. My father is a proud member of Sheet Metal Local 10, so very important for our family to understand the impact of unions. My organization, the Minnesota Leadership Council on Aging, works to support positive systems change for older Minnesotans, their family members, and our workforce here in Minnesota. So we focus a lot on things that happen at the state capitol and also on any federal legislation that would impact older Minnesotans and their family members here. We primarily look in two areas. One is really to combat ageism and to promote age-friendly communities across Minnesota. I think Nancy's comments were wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing them. And one that I would add is the abhorrent ageism that is in the attacks to Social Security, that it's not just a fiscal issue, but also one of our demographic shift, and that people attack Social Security for fear of their own aging or because of their prejudices against older adults. So important for us to think about that. We also work to ensure that Minnesota is a great place for all communities. And another point that Nancy said, talking about benefits being too low, Minnesota is a great place to age. We're consistently ranked in the top 5 for our health, our education, our abilities to stay in our communities. But that's not true for all of our communities. We really have significant equity issues in Minnesota, whether it's the difference between a rural and an urban divide. For a number of our communities of color, our women experience significant disparities in looking at Social Security, because still today, women make on average 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes in the exact same job, which, as we all know, when you calculate Social Security benefits over your lifetime, that can add to lower benefits. It also impacts some of our communities that don't have access to services and supports like strong health care when they have to spend perhaps more money or drive several hundred miles. I'm a proud son of the Iron Range. I'm from International Falls, so you all are Southerners to us. And when you look at things closing in rural communities, you have to drive further and further to get services and support. Lastly, I would say that I am a future Social Security recipient, and so this conversation is vitally important to me. I may be the token Generation Xer on the panel. I don't want to make any judgments on age, though being a gerontologist, the higher the number, the better in my regard. So, however, there are also significant understandings in if Social Security will be there for my generation and the generations after me. We know that the data are there and say that that's not true. Social Security will be there, but that belief is pervasive when only 6% of millennials believe that Social Security will be there at the current rates that beneficiaries receive. It's problematic, and it is creating an intergenerational divide when really Social Security is an intergenerational compact. It's meant for the future.
Thank you, Regine.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, if you have a question, please get it written down and turn them in. Our next guest is Buddy Robinson. Buddy has served as staff director of the Minnesota Citizens Federation Northeast for 40 years and has been co-coordinator of the Greater Minnesota Healthcare Coalition. He served as the lead staff of healthcare policy for the Minnesota Senior Federation and is co-author of Strategies for Community Empowerment. Buddy is also the creator of a presentation on Social Security and Medicare, which our organization and others have used to help educate Minnesotans about Social Security and Medicare. We want to thank Buddy for being here today and sharing his time with us.
Thank you. Just to let you know that the organization I've been with started 1975 as the Duluth Senior Coalition, and it was actually owes more to its creation and growth to more than any else to union retirees from that area. So we really have a kind of a union history and strong working relationship throughout the years. We've operated as a charity 501c3, which means we don't take any partisan stances. So instead, our mission is economic justice, and from a consumer advocacy perspective, especially for older people, and but also consumer issues for lower and middle income people of all ages. And most of our work has been regarding healthcare costs, including Medicare and insurance. One thing about insurance that's worth noting is that's included some research into how employee healthcare funds are often, unbeknownst to most people, ripped off by the third-party administrator insurance companies that that they use. There's been a lot of federal litigation about that, and so that can, besides just affect healthcare funds, it can affect what's there for pensions in health and education, health and welfare funds. So that's something significant as well for all of you. I first got involved more deeply in Social Security back in the early 80s when we had the Notch baby craziness. Some of you might remember that. And I researched it heavily, did a presentation, and did that quite a lot in the community. Kind of dispel the myth that, no, you folks have not been ripped off. It's the folks that came before you who were mistakenly overpaid, and you're actually getting the correct amount. Of course, that doesn't sit as well with, well, gee, we wanted to get more too. But then more recently, as mentioned, this presentation with input from the state AFL-CIO Retiree Council about the future of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, what the facts are, dispelling the myths and all that sort of thing. Related project was designing a folding wallet-sized card to hand out to give the basic idea regarding how much benefits will be scheduled to be paid 75 years from now. In other words, 75 to 80%, as well as the very parallel tied issue of the unfairness of the payroll tax, stopping at the cap, which then means in reality, a much lower payroll tax percentage, so to speak, for the higher wage folks. And it was I helped distribute those once at the state fair, and it was really great being able to buttonhole young people with a very quick rap. Have you heard that your Social Security benefits aren't going to be there? Yes. Well, good news. Most of it is going to be there. Here's the card. And what was so great was the visible sigh of relief of those young folks. So they're ready to hear the truth and get the relief from that, and that's part of our job. So I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you, buddy. Our final panelist is Tom Krause. Tom is an attorney who has worked for Iowa Legal Aid from 1982 to 1997. After that, he was a staff attorney for Schott Mouse and Associates, representing Social Security disability claimants, and has been lead counsel in several class action lawsuits involving the Social Security Administration. Since May of 2018, he has been with Southern Minnesota Rural Legal Services in Winona. And again, Tom, we welcome you and we thank you for spending your time with us here this morning.
Thank you. He neglected to mention that in law school I sat behind Moses. I should also note that when I was with Legal Services in Iowa, I was a member of legal aid work. I can't remember, LASW, which was part of NASW, which was part of District 65 United Mine Workers. And my wife, until she retired a year ago, was a union steward with United. She was a social worker, but she was with United Electrical Union and a union steward there. So, and I also want to note, over the last 37 years, my job has basically been to represent disabled people, mostly on Social Security issues, but I've worked a lot with other public benefits programs, medical assistance, Medicare, food stamps. But I would say that the best trained and the best workers, well, one, they are unionized, but are the workers at Social Security. They are very knowledgeable and they are generally very helpful. And we'll talk a little bit, I think later, we'll talk a little bit about some of the funding cuts to the administration, the wait times and things like that. But the workers there are unionized generally, and they are very helpful and they are very knowledgeable. And if you have a question, that they can provide valuable assistance. Like I said, much of my work over the last 30-some years has been establishing entitlement to disability benefits. A lot of people don't think too much about disability. And the definition of disability for Social Security purposes is basically that you're unable to perform any kind of work for at least 12 months. And if you look at the statistics, a worker today who is 18 years old has a 1 in 3 chance of either dying or becoming disabled before they reach their full retirement age. So disability benefits are an important part of the whole picture. And the last thing I wanted to mention is, and it's often left out of the discussion, is the Supplemental Security Income Program. Now, we're talking about Social Security where everyone works and pays in. For a lot of my clients, for a number of reasons, whether they were a stay-at-home mom for many years or whatever, they don't have the work record that they need to draw the disability insurance benefits. They get supplemental security income benefits if they're age blind or disabled. It's a maximum of $771 a month this year. No one's getting rich off of it. But it is that is part of the safety net. That's not an earned entitlement. That is part of the safety net. It's needs-based. But it's also a very important resource for many of my clients. So that's what I'm familiar with, and that's, I guess, the kind of topics that I'm here to address today. And I am very grateful to be here today, and it's wonderful to see this great crowd. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Now it's your turn. Got a bunch of questions here from the audience, and we're going to turn now to those. Some of these I can figure out one or more of our panelists might be the person to address to, and some of them they're going to have to figure it out for themselves. So perhaps Buddy and Nancy, may you want to address this first question. How are local economies impacted by Social Security spending?
I've some information, not a huge amount, but probably the best thing to start with is the question of what percentage of household income comes from Social Security benefits, and the figure for Minnesota statewide isn't. I heard was about 5.1% of total household income, which is not overwhelming, but a significant portion. It might be better to look more in terms of dollar amounts. It's about $15 billion of income annually. That's to over 930,000 folks. And of course, the vast majority of that Social Security income is spent in the local economy. Obviously, most of those folks need it for their daily expenses. So that 15 billion translates roughly to about 165,000 jobs from that local economy. Over 65 billion a year in wages for people, about another 1.4 billion in state and local taxes. So that's significant, but it does differ according to what part of the state you're in. So, for example, and a way to sort of correlate that is the question of the income in a county, household income, what portion is Social Security, and in the better off places like Scott and Carver County, about 2.8% of household income. But a place like St. Louis County, lower incomes, older people, it's more like 7.8%. So there are differences depending on what part of the state you're looking at.
And if I can just really emphasize a few points that Buddy made, Social Security is extremely important to the economy. 2/3 of seniors receive most of their income from Social Security, and that money is spent it's not generally not put into, equity or savings or something. It's spent in the local community, and it creates enormous jobs for your fellow Minnesotans. AARP did a study that showed for every dollar of Social Security benefits, it generates $2 in economic output. So it is it is a winning program for everyone.
Our next question, perhaps Tom, you'd like to address because you deal with the administrative system, I guess. Over the past several years, there has been a reduction in the support and funding for the administration of Social Security. What is the impact of this on Minnesotans? And is the impact different for the disability versus the retirement components of the program?
I'm not sure that there's much difference between the two components, but when I first started working with Social Security on the other side of things, they didn't have their teleservice claim, and they've had it for probably 30 or more years now. But the wait times are getting longer and longer. On the phone lines, you call in, you get someone. The phone lines are a place where you're not getting the best service. 10 or 20 years ago, Social Security was talking about world-class service, and the joke was third world-class service. What I've seen over the last 37 years is that every year, the budget for Social Security for the administration does not keep pace with inflation. And, the budget for administration is like 1% of the total budget. There have been a lot of good things that Social Security has been able to do as far as technology and things like that. But I mean, if you look at it, they're using hundreds of different kinds of databases. They are using different databases that are written in COBOL, which I studied when I was in college. They have people there that, they don't have people there that know how to run these old databases. And there's literally hundreds of different databases that Social Security uses. But we're just seeing a lot of different things. It's like a slow death by 1,000 cuts, and it's been going on for 30 years where they're just not funding the workers, the union members at Social Security the way that they should.
Nancy?
They started by saying he wanted to get you agitated and riled up. And so let me give you two facts that I hope get you really riled up. First of all, you should understand that the money that Social Security is spent on Social Security administration comes from your Social Security contributions. It is not general fund money. It's not tax dollars. It's what Congress does is limit how much, it's called LAE, limit on administrative expenses. So you've already paid for all the field offices, all the employees, and yet there's a $2.9 trillion surplus according to the last trustees report. And instead of them spending, 0.1% more, or some little amount more, they are closing field offices. They are curtailing the hours. And this is, you've paid for it. You should not have to wait. The other point, and I was so glad that Tom mentioned that these are unionized workers. There's a lot of union busting going on. That's AFGE. It's actually going across the government, but there is enormous amount that this administration is doing to bust this union. And what it's going to do is it'll translate into fewer services for all of us.
Okay, thank you. We have a question that came in through the live stream from Palm Harbor, Florida. If the minimum wage is raised, many employers and employees would be contributing more into the trust fund. Would that solve or help some of the long-term financing for the program? Nancy's shaking her head, so why don't you take a shot?
Absolutely. In fact, our organization has done fact sheets on a $15 minimum wage and how much additional money, because it's not just, it's those workers, but it's all the workers up and down the income scale. Pay equity, paying women what men get would also do an enormous amount. I worked on the 1983 Social Security amendments, which restored Social Security to actuarial balance for the 75 years, which would have taken us to 2057 because that was 75 years out. So you're saying, well, why are they saying now 2035? Because what we didn't anticipate then was the kind of income and wealth inequality that we've experienced. If we can, get the wealthy to pay their fair share and get the rest of us to get decent wages, which include deferred compensation in the form of Social Security, we will begin to reduce what really is, I think, immoral inequity in incomes.
I could add just one piece to that is the overall depression of wages for the last 30, 40 years obviously translates into less payroll tax revenue coming in otherwise. By the same token, those same people haven't been able to put much away for individual retirement money, which used to be the third leg of the stool. And so that just argues all the more for not just increasing wages, but expanding Social Security benefits.
Okay. So we're on the subject of the funding and so forth. We've got a couple of questions related to the cap. One is, and I think, the politics of the cap. I love this. Why are we afraid to scrap the cap? Who are we protecting? And in particular, when people question the fairness of scrapping the cap, how do we reply to the argument that upper income earners will pay in significantly more than they will receive in benefits? And it might be helpful. I'm not going to assume we all know what the cap even necessarily is. So maybe if you could all, who wants to take this one on? They're deferring to Nancy.
So as I think you know what the cap is that workers pay 6.2% of their wages up to a maximum of $132,900, and that's indexed each year with the growth in average wages. Now, most workers, 94% of workers, earn under that amount. So if you've got a steady job, you're paying that amount every paycheck. It's drawn out. But we sort of joke for, Bill Gates, he probably stops drinking by his coffee break on January 1. And, very high paid stop paying when they reach that $132,900. Now, all of the Democratic proposals that I've talked about eliminate that maximum, so everyone pays the same 6.2% on all of their income. And it is a good question if you've got someone who's not a co-sponsor of the 2100 Act or any of this other legislation, to say, how can you defend this? Why do you want this? So I think that this will be part of the solution. But again, I'd like to see us expand benefits larger than even Senator Warren's bill does. And I think the fair way to pay for it, given the income and wealth inequality, and that the very wealthy, most of their income does not come from wage income, that they contribute more to Social Security out of their other income. And it's important to recognize that because of that income and wealth inequality, and I think you were making this point, that Social Security has lost literally billions of dollars that have stayed in wealthy people's pockets and should have gone to Social Security, because the index is average wages, but those at the top wages have gone very high and everybody else has had stagnating wages.
I had just an additional comment. Two very quick things. One, I recently heard a comedian and he put sort of the wealth inequality into perspective for me. He said that he got dressed one day and he found a $20 bill in his pocket. Could you imagine finding a $20 bill in your jeans when you put them on this morning? He was so excited. It changed his weekend, the $20. And he made a parallel to show that Bill Gates finding the equivalent amount of money based on at what threshold would Bill Gates have to be surprised the way he was at the $20 bill. And it was $660,000. He would have to find $660,000 in his pocket to have the same joy that this man found in the $20 bill in his jeans. So that's a huge, kind of metaphor for the income inequality. There also are often proposals talking about, well, wealthy people don't need it, so why don't we just get them out of this spectrum? It's causing problems. One of the fundamentals of the Social Security Act, one of the pillars, and why there is broad acceptance, is that this is an earned benefit of everyone. As a result of this insurance model, it really has significant less stigma than other programs that are provided either in an insurance model or not. It has wide acceptance. So my sort of one kind of concern would be to think about ensuring that Social Security is a universal benefit for those that paid into it through our Social Security. It is an earned program that we get. It's meant to support us in our retirement. So just something to kind of think about.
I agree with that completely. I mean, some people say, well, that, and in fact, it was on the video that wealthy people shouldn't get it. They've earned it too. They should get it. And in fact, all the bills have that if they're paying more in, their benefits will go up, but they should pay a lot more than they're now paying. And that's what these proposals do. I think that you're exactly right.
I'd add one other point into answering that kind of question that people raise about the unfairness to the rich. Most people probably don't know that Social Security was designed from the get-go on a benefits on a progressive curve to help. So people with the lowest incomes might get 90% of the previous wage back, and at the higher end, 20% or less. And so the question then is exactly how progressive should it be? And folks like all of us would argue it should be more progressive than it is. If you don't think it should be progressive at all, then you're probably either very, very rich or a die-hard libertarian. So educate people that it's supposed to be progressive, and with good reason, helping out more to people who have less wages. Well, that's what you could call humane.
But it also fits within insurance principles. I agree exactly. Yeah. It's a very clever formula. So the more you contribute, the larger absolute dollars you get, but the smaller percentage return. And the idea is that we are insuring when you start your working life, even if you're going to a New York law firm and making tons of money, you could walk in front of a truck and get and be completely disabled. So you never, and then you won't have had all these years of earnings. You'll really need Social Security. So the idea is that one of the things we are collectively insuring are against life's adversities, where you may die with very young children. That can happen rich or poor. So it's a program that unites us. And again, we shouldn't be dividing up by, oh, this person's too wealthy to get it. No, they should just pay their fair share.
All right, this next question gets to something that puzzles me. How many of us remember the tax cuts that were put in a couple of years ago, right? Remember that? How many of us remember them saying, well, you know what, we're going to have to cut Social Security to pay for these tax cuts? Y'all remember that one? So I'm puzzled about well, how does all this work? And this question here, I think, gets at this. It's our understanding that payroll taxes we paid through our working lives are put into a trust fund. The fund then buys treasury bonds, in effect borrowing money from the trust fund. So it's a loan. It's going to get paid back with interest to generate income for Social Security programs. But it seems that now some in Congress are claiming that the federal government's not going to honor this debt because they can't afford it. How many of us get to do that, right? I'm not going to pay you. The question is this true? What is the relationship between these bonds that the Social Security buys and the national debt and deficit? And do we actually have political leaders saying they're not going to honor this debt to us?
That's a great question for Nancy or a macroeconomics 101 course. So
No, I'm happy to answer that. The Social Security, the way that it's funded is it's current funded. Now, a lot of private pension plans used to be current funded, but as I said, because they can go out of business, you need some advanced funding. But you can advance fund a pension program, this kind of insurance, or you can current fund it. And a lot of advisory councils have talked about it, and there are arguments for both, but over the history, they've decided current funding is the right way to do it. So the money that gets paid in is paid out in benefits, but sometimes there's a surplus. So what are they supposed to do with the surplus? They're not going to put it under the mattress. They're going to invest it. And you could invest it in equities, but Congress, all the way back to 1935, required that it be invested in the safest investment on earth, Treasury bonds backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. Again, this is the workers' money. This is all of our money. And Congress said, we don't want to gamble with it. Now, that's being used. These have the same kind of status. There's actually, I think in my book, there's a picture of what one of the bonds looks like. They're very carefully accounted. You know exactly the par value and the interest rate. These are not casual loans. These are Social Security trust through the trustees lending money to the federal government, the same as China does, the same as a lot of private pension plans do. If Social Security if the federal government were to ever not pay that back, that would be a default. And it would be outrageous for them not to default on China or the OPEC countries that hold treasury bonds, and to default on our American workers. So yes, some of them are trying to do that by cutting our benefits so they never have to pay back the loans, but it would be a default, and it's something we should all watch carefully. Go to socialsecurityworks.org. We will let you know the second that started to happen, and we should all be in the streets if that were to happen.
Rajan, from your perspective as head of the Minnesota Leadership Council on Aging, can you share with us some perspective on the redistributive effects of Social Security between urban and rural areas, how they fare in this regard?
Sure. So I think I want to talk, if I can, just slightly on lots of different communities, not just rural and urban. What I would start out by saying is that all communities in Minnesota are positively impacted by Social Security. It's the sort of bottom line. Without Social Security, our communities would be in great trouble. If you look at, for example, in rural communities without Social Security, we'd be increasing our poverty rate by 21%. Currently, rural communities versus urban communities have 2 times the rate for disability benefits. So there are real differences. The other thing that's important to note, and I think Buddy said it well, is that our rural communities aren't all the same, right? So I said I'm from International Falls. We like to think ourselves as the best community in the state, the icebox of the nation. I had to leave International Falls due to economic issues. There was a closure in the mill back in the mid 80s, and my father lost his job. And the only employment that we had was moving to the Twin Cities. And so I grew up in the Twin Cities. I consider that positive as well. I didn't abandon it. So when we think about Social Security in rural communities, it's very complex, thinking about workforce issues, but also thinking about rural communities as one thing. So if you look at, for example, Buddy talked about this idea of how much a household relies on Social Security. Southern Minnesota rural communities rely on Social Security for a smaller proportion of their income than northern rural Minnesota communities. And so there's lots of diversity and really fine points we need to think about when considering Social Security. I will also just mention once more, even though I've gotten the stop, I need to mention that there is significant disparities in the utilization of Social Security for women and for people of color. Women more often than not have to rely on Social Security for 90% or more of their income. Almost just under half, a little over a third of African American women rely on Social Security completely for their income. And so this idea of our benefits being too low, imagine if Social Security was the only thing you had for your household. It affects too many of our communities.
How a lack of Social Security would affect different folks, so tremendous increase in poverty rate. I'm sorry, so if there were no Social Security, how would that affect the poverty rate? I only have national figures, but it's the elderly poverty would rise to 44%, but for elderly women, it would be over 50%, and for people of color, it would be over 60% pushed into poverty.
Our next question is on the disability aspect of Social Security. It says disability insurance aspects of Social Security are perhaps less well understood by people in general. What do Minnesotans need to understand or know about the impact of Social Security disability and who benefits from it?
The brochure that most of you received notes that Social Security provided disability benefits to 124,000 workers in 2016. That's not the whole story. It also provides disability benefits to the children of disabled workers, and something like 22,500 children are receiving benefits based on a parent's disability. And when I say children, now that can include adult children. If a child becomes disabled prior to age 22 and a parent is drawing disability benefits based on age or disability, or if the parent is deceased, the child can draw disability benefits on it as well. But in any case, the disability benefits for the workers amounts to about $1.6 billion a year in Minnesota, and it's closer to $2 billion when you include spouses and children drawing benefits. In addition, there's another 60,000 individuals drawing SSI, and again, that's the safety net aspect of it, the supplemental security income, which does not have the work requirements, the work and pay in requirements of Social Security. So it does have a big effect on the state. But my practice has focused on representing individuals. And a typical client for me, if they're lucky, they have a spouse who has a job. If they don't, then you're looking at someone who hopefully has medical assistance, maybe has some housing assistance, or maybe they're couch surfing, or maybe they're homeless. Maybe they're 60 years old and living in their parents' basement still. And that's literally true often. Maybe they get food stamps, or hopefully they get food stamps or SNAP benefits. But for cash assistance, they're getting $203 in general assistance, $203 a month in cash assistance. The average disability benefit is about $1,100. So I think you can imagine the benefit that it is to that individual to get the disability benefits. So there's a great effect, I think, on statewide and for individuals.
I just can add the importance of this. One of my colleagues works for Paralyzed Veterans of America. He's a millennial, and we talked, earlier we've talked throughout this about millennials and younger people thinking the benefits won't be there for them in the future. He always makes the point, they are there for people, for young people right now. He was in the military. He had a spinal cord injury. He needed a number of surgeries. And he says he would have been homeless without Social Security. And he makes that point all the time to his peers. Social Security is there for all of us.
And Nancy, just to say again, as a member of Generation X and my younger siblings and millennials, 61% of millennials oppose benefit cuts. So this isn't an intergenerational warfare. It is messaging that occurs, that most millennials, most younger people support Social Security greatly. They want it for their future, but they've heard the message that it won't be there, so they don't believe it's going to be there.
I'm so glad you said that, because our polling shows the same thing, that if you ask the younger you are, the less likely you are to think it's going to be there in the future. But if you ask a follow-up question, well, then should it be cut? They say no, because they know they have older relatives that depend on it, and they want to be able to depend on it. They know they will need it.
Okay. Our next question, this one is like simple and to the point. Why do we need to pay taxes on our Social Security income?
That
Apparently a popular item.
That is a good question. The Larson bill doesn't eliminate the taxes, but it does reduce the taxes. The theory, the concept behind it is that it's treating it like private pensions. The employer portion is deducted, and so there are no taxes that are paid on it. The part the workers pay are paid with the after-tax dollars. But as the reaction of this group, it is a very unpopular part of the program. It was put in 1983. And as I say, the Larson bill reduces it. It doesn't eliminate it.
So I'm probably going to say something that might be unpopular with the audience, but just to answer the question, Minnesota is one of the states that does tax Social Security retirement income. And the answer to your question is it provides significant revenue to the state of Minnesota to pay for the services and supports that we all want, whether it's state parks, our roads and bridges, our state veterans homes. And I'm just giving the answer as to how why the state of Minnesota taxes Social Security. It's for the revenue. So just.
That actually is another important point, and that is that generally when you pay income tax, it goes into the general fund and goes to all the sorts of things that you were just saying for Minnesota. But at the federal level, actually it was a compromise in 1983 because the Republicans wanted to cut benefits and the Democrats wanted, and the Democrats wanted to raise taxes. So this is money that is paid in income tax, but it is dedicated to Social Security. So it's part of the Social Security revenue that gets paid out in benefits. But I know it's quite controversial.
Okay. The next question, and I'm not sure I understand it, but I'm sure you all will. Are they, I assume they meaning Congress, addressing lifting the amount, and I think it probably means the amount of income that is exempt before being taxed for Social Security benefits? You understand that question? Which apparently has not been raised for some 20 years.
It's really related to that same question. Right now, if you have an individual who has income over 32,000, or a couple that has income over 50,000, that's the group that has to take part of your Social Security as income for income tax purposes. And what the Larson bill is raised those thresholds to 50,000 and 100,000.
It goes back to the question of how progressive do we want to be? You could go even higher than the Larson amounts, and same thing at the state level. So if those taxes only affected the super rich, and everyone understood that, there wouldn't be as much opposition from as many people.
The next question gets to an issue of generational differences, I guess. A recent editorial in the Pioneer Press stated that a fundamentally unfair aspect of the system going back to 1935 is that each generation is not responsible for paying its own benefits, thus creating intergenerational unfairness or conflict.
Go ahead, Nancy, and then I'll.
Okay, we all have things to say about it. As I say, this is just a way of funding Social Security. It's current funded. One way to think of it, we're all contributing to ourselves, but historically throughout human history, adult parents took care of aging adult children took care of aging parents. But that was very unfair. You had some who had no children, or children weren't in a position to take care of them, and others that had many. So you could think of this, the way it's funded, as simply that being streamlined and carried on. It's not the current funding. It was that a decision was made in the 1930s that whether it was really grandparenting in these older people, because at that time there were people who were contributing who were not going to get very much in benefits. And the question was, do they get like a minuscule benefit, or do you decide current people who are close to retirement got an adequate benefit? And they made the decision that it does. Now, there is this, what's called a legacy debt as a result, which is another argument for more progressive financing for the program. But it's basically very sound, very sensible, and fair to all generations.
So one of the courses that I teach is the history of social policy in the United States to graduate students. And what I'm finding is, as we move further and further away from the reform that FDR enacted as his legislation in the 1930s, we lose our understanding of the context. Why did we enact the legislation? And a fundamental understanding of Social Security is lost. This is a multi-generational compact that the United States has with each and every one of us. So I think it's just important for us to continue to go back to this fundamental, monumental legislation that benefits all of us, regardless of our age.
All right, we want to,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Time to add to that?
Go for it.
Yeah, just a couple other points. It goes back to how people have been misled into thinking that it's more like a individual retirement account instead of an insurance program, and not just for old age, but disability and life insurance or survivor benefits. Yeah, but a key part is that there hasn't been mentioned about realize that there are differences in the size of generations. So my generation, the baby boomers, really huge. Next one, Gen X, not so much. But then one after that, the millennials, another boom, even a bigger boom than us original boomers. And so because of the system of mostly paying current benefits out of current payroll taxes, the current funding, that raises new issues when you've got differences in the sizes. So for the boomers, back in the early 80s, Congress was smart. Oh yeah, we better prepare for that. So they made those changes, including payroll tax increase, to deliberately build up a surplus in the trust fund to make sure there's going to be enough to pay for the boomers' benefits. That surplus gets depleted 2035. Now with the millennials coming up, it's actually past time to do a similar adjustment, build up surplus for them. And the longer we wait to do that, the harder it will be to do it.
So we are coming to the end of the Q&A portion of our program. If we didn't get to your question, we apologize and hope that you will forgive us. I don't know if our panelists will be available afterwards, but I know I just put them on the spot. And before we move on to the close, we want to share a couple of interesting and instructive videos with you.
Millennials are going to need Social Security more than baby boomers will need Social Security. It's long overdue for boomers and millennials to unite and talk about something that's within our grasp and something that we can solve, and do so pragmatically in a common sense manner, and address it in a business-like manner, the same way any actuarial would do that. Now, the unique feature here is that every single thing that we call for in these enhancements has been already, by the independent actuary, said not only is it paid for, but it is sustainable beyond 75 years. Wouldn't it be great on our watch to take this off Congress's plate and to go home and be able to look everyone in the eye and say, not only did we fix this, we fixed it for, by law as we're required, beyond 75 years, and we enhanced it. We won't allow for anyone who's paid their quarters in to retire into poverty. We won't see women of color have to find themselves impoverished, even though they've worked all their lives and paid in their quarters.
What's going on with the debt?
It's very disturbing, and it's driven by the three big entitlement programs that are very popular: Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid.
Social Security has nothing to do with the deficit. Social Security is totally funded by the payroll tax levied on employer and employee.
That's 70% of what we spend every year. The subject we were just discussing, the funding of the government, is about 30% of what we spend.
If you reduce the outgo of Social Security, that money would not go into the general fund to reduce a deficit. It would go into the Social Security Trust Fund. So Social Security has nothing to do with balancing a budget or erasing or lowering the deficit.
So thank you to the great communicator. We hope that today, this morning, you have learned something about Social Security, where it's at and where it might be going. Most of all, we hope that you are inspired to act for yourself, your friends, your neighbors, your family, to protect and expand Social Security. I'm wondering how you all feel about that challenge. That was pretty lame. That was lame. All right. The future of Social Security is bound up in the future of what kind of a nation and people we shall be. I read it in one of Nancy's books that Social Security is a testament and measure of a caring nation. It is our responsibility, therefore, to act to ensure that ours is the kind of nation that I believe we all want, one in which people care enough about one another to ensure that all can be assured of a life with a modicum of Social Security to lead a life with dignity. You see up on here what we call asks, and you have, hopefully in your programs, a sheet that says take action now. You might want to take a moment to look at these. And we're going to ask you to either silently or to whoever's sitting next to you to perhaps pledge yourself to one or more of these as we work to create a movement to ensure not only the preservation of Social Security, but its expansion. I spent my life as an organizer in the labor movement. It's about what we do. Do you believe that we and others can do this? I want to close again by thanking those people and organizations that have made today happen, and to thank all of you for taking time on a Saturday morning to be here. We come from many different backgrounds and life experiences, but I trust that we have in common the conviction that ours shall be a nation dedicated, as it states in our Constitution, to the promotion of the general welfare, a conviction that we are and shall be a nation of people who care about one another. Remember that a determined minority can move a majority. We must be part of that determined minority. And so to end, I would ask that as you are able, please stand. Yeah, that means get up. And join together with a union tradition that I'm familiar with that we've used as an expression of our aspiration to ensure a future of dignity for all Americans. If you would join with me. Thank you and have a great weekend. If you did not already sign in when you came in, please do so. We want to be able to stay in touch with folks.